Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. It's Wednesday, and we always get a chance to talk with interesting people on Wednesdays and good topics. And this Wednesday, no exception. Our good friend Scott Weeman will be here second hour. You probably know or remember Scott as a person who has devoted his life to helping Catholics and others with a holistic approach to overcoming addiction. So we'll do that in the second hour. If you have questions about your own addictions or addictions of people in the family, about how the sacraments can be a part of healing, about how the sacraments can work hand in hand with all kinds of other therapies to help those who are experiencing addictions. Second hour is for you. This hour, we talk about mercy. We have the man who wrote the book on mercy. As a matter of fact, the book is called Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. The author is Father Daniel Maloney. He's a priest of the Archdiocese of Boston, the former Catholic chaplain at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And before his ordination in 2010, he earned a doctorate in philosophy from Notre Dame University. You probably heard of that little university in the Midwest there. He's worked at think tanks in Princeton, Washington, D.C., New York, served as the associate editor of First Things, and now is with the Augustine Institute. That is quite a resume, Father Daniel Maloney. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, given that resume, what about the quality of mercy is the thing that you said, that's what I'm going to write my book about?
It was all that stuff kind of ties into the book. It was, the book was probably 15 years or more in the making. I started writing when I was in graduate school at Notre Dame, trying to write an article about God's, how the very question that I end up wrestling with in the first chapters of the book, how could it be that God's justice and God's mercy are opposites, which is the way most of us think about them, if they both are gods?
Oh, yeah.
Like, that would mean right?
Yes.
It's not sort of an obvious sort of point, but most people kind of miss it. So, and I got interested in the topic of mercy. You realize that they can't be opposites. That mercy can't be that like justice is strictness and mercy is leniency or something like that.
Right.
Because if God is perfectly just and God is perfectly merciful, and they're opposites, that means that whenever God's just, he's merciless. And whenever God is merciful, he's being unjust. And that doesn't make any sense at all, because like on Tuesdays, God's just, and Wednesdays, he's merciful or something, right? God's the same eternally,
right,
perfectly, everything he is. So that meant that those concepts were, as most people use them, were not right. And so that got me interested in kind of some of the deep philosophical and theological ideas. And then when I became a priest, of course, I was applying them in the sacrament of confession, which gave me this whole other understanding of the notion of mercy.
So let's get into that then, because I'll tell you what, the general kind of pop culture view would be, well, you kind of have the Old Testament God, he's a God of justice. You got the New Testament God, he's a God of mercy. And I know that you don't agree with that because I can read a book, but how then do we make an accord that the oneness of God, but he is totally and absolutely a God of justice and completely and totally a God of mercy? How do we make those two things fit together?
Well, part of it is how you define those ideas. What is, and not just on our side, not just language, but it's actually what does it mean for God to be just? Is what is God? So the basic solution that I came with after all these years of wrestling was that justice is the word, and this even goes back to its etymology in Latin and Greek and German and things like that. Justice just means what's right. And it's big when you zoom back from, it's not environmental justice, it's not racial justice, it's not distributive justice or social justice. Justice as a whole big concept means our idea of what's right. And then mercy is the virtue that kicks in when things aren't right. It's the right. So you have an idea of what's the right way the world ought to be, or creation ought to be, and then when something's wrong, we don't just sort of say, it's wrong. Mercy is, well, how do we right the wrong? How do we make, therefore, we know what the way the world ought to be in its rightness. It's not right. How do we make it more right? So mercy then is not simply saying we're going to give up on justice. It's instead saying we're going to restore to justice, to rightness, things that are wrong. So therefore, mercy is always pointing at justice.
You can see how this addresses some of the concern that that a perfect justice is one that none of us could tolerate, but it also addresses the concern of the person who's tired of mercy in the sense of this. All this mercy, like for example, just if you look at our world today and the tremendous disorder in our world today. Well, sometimes I think the person would say that too much mercy is actually the enemy of order because it makes people feel at liberty to do horrible things if they know that there's just this endless mercy available to them. This kind of connecting justice and mercy addresses that concern, that there's not too much mercy. That would be like saying there's too much setting the world right.
Exactly. It's impossible for that to be the case. The one of the mistakes people make is to associate mercy with leniency, or mercy with being lax about things, about order, and that just that's a recipe for disorder. I have a little piece in my book about a fictional monastery where Brother Tardy is always late for Vespers or something like that, and if the abbot doesn't discipline him, and just says, I'm going to be merciful and merciful in quotes, right? And let Brother Tardy always be late. Well, then the other monks are waiting for him and they might think to themselves, well, I can wait 5 minutes to finish my thing rather than rush off to the chapel because Brother Tardy's going to hold us late anyway. And then 2 guys are late 5 minutes and 3 guys are late. And then suddenly no one's really there on time and people are kind of, well, can I just do my vespers, my prayers on my own? And all the order breaks down if you let one guy do that. Or think of a soccer team where you one guy just doesn't practice or something like that. You need to have it. So in little things like that, you sort of say, well, yeah, so we need to have some order. But on the other hand, that's just because we've defined mercy in the wrong way. If you say, no, I've got to make him right, part of what I have to do with Brother Tardy is get him to show up on time. Like, right? Part of what you have to do with anyone who does a criminal, you want them to be a law-abiding citizen when they get out of jail. You want your child to learn how to control his emotions rather than just give in to them, or learn how to be respectful for people or make his bed or whatever. These are all just little ways in which what you're doing there is saying I'm trying to discipline someone to make them better. And you can see how this is part of the letter to the Hebrews, how God in the Old Testament disciplines us to make us holier. And that discipline sometimes is painful, as it often was for the Jewish people. It's often is for us too. We sort of have to cut away those parts of our bad habits, those parts of our ways of managing with the world that kind of get in the way of our holiness. Our coping mechanism. Sometimes you have to break us down and rebuild us spiritually in order to be a saint. But that's mercy. So mercy sometimes feels like it's pretty hard stuff. So we have to give up things that are very important to us, like our pride.
But the mercy is the aspect of mercy, the sense that God, from God's perspective, I'm not going to leave you in a state of disorder. I'm not going to leave you in a state of injustice. Mercy involves bringing everyone out of disorder and injustice.
Correct. I mean, that's the whole, if you want to look at the story of the Bible, is everything was just as God wanted it to be. Then original sin and the fall happened. And then God is scrambling to right the wrong of that first sin. So everything that he's doing, everything in the Old Testament, the whole story is that he's trying to limit the damage, cultivate this one small group of people, the people of Israel, get them bigger, then sort of find the remnant that's faithful and cut away everyone else, and then find that then later as they grow, the faithful grow, again find within them, cut away those who have made mistakes and bring them close. So he's gradually getting thinner and thinner. This is the great moment of the Babylonian captivity of the Old Testament, when the Babylonians captured all the Jews. That was a time of great purification of Israel. When they went back, they were going to follow the Bible, because if they didn't, they knew what God would punish them. But that taught them to be more zealous for the law. And then, of course, that plays out in the Pharisees, who are so zealous for the law they're kind of jerks. And then Jesus goes deeper and deeper and deeper to teach them it's not just about getting things right. You can't just the scribes who don't lift a finger to help people become just are making the mistake of being justice. That's justice only, not without having a concept of mercy. But everything God's doing is reaching down to lift us up. The phrase I use is, restorative solidarity is a way to describe God's mercy. He has solidarity with us. That's in fact one of the core meanings of the word chesed, which is the word for mercy in the Old Testament. Is that God is faithful. He has solidarity with us even when we are not faithful to Him. But it's not just a sort of, hey, well, but I love you just the way you are. It's I love you, but I also want to lift you up to where you ought to be. And so it's got this element of solidarity in it. It's got an element of direction. I'm restoring you to where you ought to be. I'm righting the wrong that is your soul. And it also has this notion, it exposes God's omnipotence, right? Because one difference between mercy and something like, say, just pity is that mercy, you kind of make a difference. Think of the works of mercy. If I'm going to clothe the naked, I need to have clothes to give them. If I'm going to give alms to somebody, I need to have money. I need to have the power to make a difference. If I'm going to instruct the ignorant, I have to have knowledge. The totality of God's mercy shows He's able to perfect every imperfection. And so the mercy is one way of revealing God's awesome power, because He's not just able to sort of say, oh, it's too bad. I have solidarity with you, but I can't do anything about it. Right? That's part of the, and it teaches us we can trust God to make things better. And that's part of, in fact, that's one of the great slogans of mercy, right? Is St. Faustina's connection of divine mercy and this notion that Jesus, I should trust in you.
Our number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Our guest is Father Daniel Maloney. His book is called Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. If you have a question about any aspect of mercy, this hour is for you, 888-318-7884. Maybe you are lacking that experience of mercy in your life. Would like some guidance to help to find that. You're welcome to call. Maybe you're concerned about confession and finding mercy in confession. You'd like more information on that, or you just a better understanding of what happens there. 888-318-7884. I want to ask Father Maloney when we come back about the relationship between mercy and the truth. Is it merciful sometimes to just let people to live without the truth or go without the truth? Better to just allow them to have the peace of not knowing rather than disturbing them with the truth. We'll find out if that's really merciful when we come back. Again, the number 888-318-7884. As I said, our guest is Father Daniel Maloney, and you are welcome to call. Before we go to the break, that 20 Answers flash sale is, they extended it through this whole week, so you can get any one of our 20 Answers books for just $1 at shop.catholic.com. Any one. Or you can get them all. You can get each one for just $1 right now at shop.catholic.com. 20 Answers, Angels and Demons, Death and Judgment, Divorce and Remarriage, Mary, God, Salvation, the Eucharist. I'm just going to keep reading the list, Nick. You go to break whenever you want. 20 Answers, the Papacy, Scripture. A few minutes each week with our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus, will help you understand and defend your Catholic faith like a boss. Get it wherever you get your podcasts or listen anytime at CatholicAnswersFocus.com. We Catholics just celebrated the Assumption and Coronation of Mary, so we asked Father Hugh about these important feasts, and he ended up telling us some really cool things about Mary going to heaven and being crowned queen. Also this week, the Catholic Church teaches that our justification, which can also be called getting right with God, is not a one-time thing but a process. But the letter to the Romans seems to imply that our justification might just be a one-time event. Carlo Broussard explains the truth about what St. Paul taught and why the Catholic Church gets this one right. Catholic Answers Focus is free, brand new twice a week, and now available on YouTube.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Now, not only can you watch EWTN anywhere but anytime with EWTN On Demand. Get on-demand access to more than 12,000 EWTN programs, including live shows and specials, all in one place, all free. Just go to EWTN.com/on-demand. There's nothing to fill out, no memberships required, and no fees to pay. All you need is an internet connection, and you're good to go. EWTN On Demand. Fast, easy, and free.
"20 Answers Faith and Reason," "20 Answers Catholic Social Teaching," "20 Answers Faith and Works," and "20 Answers New Age." That's the entire list. You can get them all for $1 right now at shop.catholic.com. Our guest this hour is a PhD in philosophy, a priest of the Catholic Church, and now a member of the staff at the Augustine Institute. He has a brand new book from Ignatius Press out just this year in time for the Feast of the Divine Mercy. The book is called, well, our guest is called Father Daniel Maloney. The book is called Mercy: What Every Catholic Should Know. And if there's something you'd like to know about mercy, whether you're Catholic or not, you can call 888-318-7884. As a matter of fact, non-believers are sometimes our best interlocutors on the topic of mercy because they love to challenge us on the God of justice and the God of mercy. So if you're not a believer and you'd like to get a sense from someone who is quite capable of answering your questions about what Catholics really and truly believe about the mercy of God and about the justice of God, 888-318-7884 is the number. So I suppose there's a certain sense in which we are considered vicious and mean in the culture today, we Catholics, because we insist on things like, well, marriage has a definition, and there are two sexes, and God made these two sexes, and we don't obfuscate those things. We insist upon them, and we don't just insist upon them for ourselves, but we insist everyone should hold these things, these basic truths about what it is to be a human being, and it's unhealthy for those who don't. So is that a failure of mercy on our part to insist on the truth of things like marriage and I mean, it's you almost can't believe it that you have to defend the fact that humans are just two sexes, but you do in fact have to defend that now. Is that a lack of mercy on our part, Father?
Well, no, that would, if that were the case, that would imply that the way God made things somehow lacked mercy, which is again the problem that you talked about at the beginning, that mercy and justice are not opposites. And since God is truth, God is as well as justice, that you wouldn't say that truth and justice are opposed to each other. So if you go back to that deep theology that what is God, he is both true and he is just and he is mercy. And so they would all have to kind of work together. And the way they work together is that we in the Catholic Church are trying to not do what the Pharisees did, what Jesus accused the Pharisees of doing, which was to say, here's the way things ought to be, and then too bad for you if you're wrong. Right? This is part of, so when we defend the truth, what we're doing is saying, here's the way things ought to be. And sometimes that's really ambitious for people. Like, we want you to, I mean, Jesus says to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, right? That's, all of us are falling short of that. So the church is, different from the secular culture in that when we say, here's the way things ought to be, we also say, and if they're not that way, we have a whole bunch of responses to it, right? We're not just going to lay out, here's justice, here's truth, too bad for you if you fall short. Like, the whole point of the Christian faith, which starts from the point that no, Jesus died on the cross in order to right wrongs.
Yes.
So if you're wrong, if you're a sinner, we have the answer. Come to confession, get baptized. So the point of charity is that you both say, I'm calling you to perfection because you can be so much more than you are. And then let me show you how. right? The secular culture, like the cancel culture, says, I call in my book, I have a chapter called Justice Only Politics, where people have these rich ideas of how race relations ought to be, or how gender relations ought to be, or something like that. And if you deviate from that one iota, they come down on you with a ton of bricks. They cancel you. You get spammed in your email. They tell everyone your social security number and go steal their right. It's this crazy reaction, as if they've not thought through, one, what it'd be like to live under that regime if it were universalized, and two, they just haven't thought through mercy, what to do when things go wrong. So they have this rich notion of justice, or at least some of them do, but they've not. And in the classic way of talking about things, that's how you describe a tyrant, who's going to be cruel in his pursuit of the truth and pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
So when people accuse Catholics of being, cruel or being merciless, what they're assuming we don't actually, when they're saying we're jerks, for talking about the truth and holding up high standards, because they don't realize that we have the whole rich. We both have justice and mercy. We're doing both things, and not just condemning.
Lots of folks on the line for you, Father. Shall we go to the calls?
That sounds great.
All right. Let's start with Arthur in Lubbock, Texas, listening on Our Lady of Victory Radio. Arthur, your question for Father Daniel Maloney.
I was just wondering what sort of guidelines priests have on giving penance relating to mercy. I've had occasions where I had gone many, many years without going and got a fairly light penance, and other times when I sure didn't. What are the guidelines?
Well, there's kind of two schools about how to do that, right? And you might have gotten one from each. So there's the classic idea, and this was something that the curé of Ars, St. John Vianney, used to do, which was that he would complete himself a heavy penance. So if it's been 20 years since you've been to confession, and you have a whole lot of stuff you got to bring to confession. Well, if you were then to come say, and by the way, I need you to basically fast for the next 20 years to make up for it, right? That would be the equal and opposite sort of response to the sins that you've committed, or something like that. It could crush you if you're just starting to come back to the faith. And so but in solidarity, he and perhaps other people, so the priest might say, here's a light penance for you, but I'm going to fast, or I'm going to mortify myself, or I'm going to pray, or I'm going to do, because the whole church because it's Jesus basically who's the one who's forgiving your sins. The whole church can participate in your penance in some way. So that might be part of what's going. If you went to a solid priest who's thinking this way, he might give you a light penance in order to not discourage you from coming to confession the next time, but himself do the penance. Another school is to kind of look at it with a different focus, which is what's good for you. What do you need right now? Since in some level, every little sin is an infinite offense to God. There's nothing you could actually do on your own that would make you square with God, right? That's why we needed Jesus to die for us. And so the death of Christ, the sacrifice of Christ, is so superabundant that the real question when looking at a penance is, what's the right medicine for your soul at this moment? So it might be that now that you're a little bit stronger and you've gone to confession 3 weeks in a row, what you did to your wife requires me to sign a heavy penance for you, and that would be the best thing for you, even if it's not. So there's two ways. One is to make the penance proportionate to the sins in some very loose sense, or the other way is to think of the penance as medicine or a spiritual exercise to make you spiritually stronger. So those would be so you might have two priests from two different modes, or sometimes I'll be really light with a guy who's been away for 20 years, and really lay it on thick. Like you need to spend 25 minutes in prayer to think about what you did, or something like that, for someone for whom that's seems to me to be the right response.
That makes sense to you, Arthur?
Fabulous. I never knew that anyone else participated in the penance besides the confessioner.
That's how Lent began. Actually, Lent began with the whole parish participating in the penance of the people who were preparing for their confession. That's an ancient idea in the church.
I feel really good about that. Nick, next time I go to confession, I'm going to ask for something for you to do for me. Does that seem fair? Arthur, thanks very much for the call. We're talking mercy with the man who wrote the book on mercy. Literally wrote the book on mercy. It's called Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. It's new this year from the Augustine Institute and Ignatius Press. You can get it wherever you get your Catholic books. If they don't have it at your bookstore, they'll get it for you. It'll be there in a few days. Daniel Maloney is the priest author of this book. It's interesting to me that we've gone so long and we have hardly talked about the kind of who you called the prophet. Yes, you called her a prophet, Sister Faustina. So maybe I'll go back to calls. But I want to ask you about Sister Faustina a little bit when we come back. Okay, Father?
Okay.
Father Daniel Maloney, our guest, our number, if you want to talk about mercy, maybe you're against mercy. If you are, you're welcome to call. We'll have that conversation. 888-318-7884.
Who or what is God? Does the universe provide clues to God's existence? Why would a loving, all-powerful God permit suffering in the world? In 20 Answers God, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, all while it guides you down a path of rational inquiry and understanding towards an encounter with the central mystery of the universe. 20 Answers God is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the Church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Dr. David Anders here. Where is purgatory in the Bible? Why confess my sins to a priest?
Find out more tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern on Call to Communion.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
The book is called Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. I don't know why mercy is one of those words that seems like it should have the opposite effect, but it's somewhat divisive as a word. Some people have a reaction of kind of cringing at it. Others may be putting it in juxtaposition to everything else about our faith. So a healthy view of mercy is essential to living the Christian faith, and you can get that from this book, the brand new book, Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know by Father Daniel Maloney, available now from Ignatius Press and the Augustine Institute. If you want to talk with Father Maloney, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I want to tell you a little story about something that happened here in San Diego years ago, maybe 15 years ago. This woman paid out of her own money. She loved Sister Faustina. She bought a billboard and she put it up down in the beach community where there's a lot of loose behavior and drug use and all that down. And it's a picture of Jesus and the rays coming out of his heart, so it's the Divine Mercy picture. Mm-hmm. And all she put on the billboard was the words, "Come to my mercy." And the reaction, I thought the reaction in that community was going to be so negative, but it was so positive. People writing letters to the newspaper saying, this is the kind of thing that Christians should be saying. This is how they should be. I'm not a Christian, but this is the kind of thing that makes me like Jesus and all. And I was just astounded by that. But there is something about the message of the mercy that people know they need. They know they need mercy.
I think that's right. And that's part of the reason why everybody, if you told someone that there's a guy who's going to sit and listen to you for as long as you want to talk about all the bad things you've done, and at the end forgive you on behalf of justice itself, right? People will be lining up to go to confession in huge numbers. Instead, so the whole idea that that we're embracing you and saying that, no matter what people today feel so awful about themselves. I mean, not just they're lonely. Suicides are going through are increasing, and there's just so many people who. And again, I think it's part of the problem of our era, is that as we become more secularized, we also lose this language of mercy, the idea of mercy, the practice of mercy. It's a hard thing to actually be merciful to somebody. It's a hard thing to forgive, and it's a lot easier to sort of say, hey, I'm going to just cancel you. I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to, I say excommunicate you, or anathematize. Those are religious words, but to do that in a secular sense.
Yeah.
To heck with you. I'm going to leave you alone. I'm going to do my own thing. And so people can feel so awful about themselves when they start to think about all the great things. And that's part of, you were mentioning St. Faustina. That's part of one of the questions that we have. So in the book, I talk about this discussion about private revelation, right? So the stories that St. Faustina, along with other visionaries, have been, their visions have been approved by the church in certain ways, right? Pope John Paul II canonized St. Faustina as the first saint of the new millennium. And he adopted the vision that she had, that we ought to have a octave of Divine Mercy a novena of Divine Mercy that ends in the Divine Mercy Sunday. And the church is that's a big promotion of this idea of one saint. The same way that the church has devotion to the Sacred Heart and a Feast of the Sacred Heart based upon the vision of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque. And so one of the theological questions is, what do we make of these private visions, right? It's one of the things that drives Protestants crazy. The Bible is the Bible, and then you have these nuns who say stuff, and the church just adds it to their calendar. And so Pope Benedict, when he was commented on this, he said that the way to understand these visionaries and these visions is as a kind of modern day prophecy. The language of private revelation versus public revelation can be confusing because it makes it sound like the criticism that what St. Faustina saw in her prayer was equal to St. Paul, equal to the Bible. So he says, don't call it that, but call it prophecy, and think of it as God inspiring these people to say something that's important for our time, and there are rules for it. It has to be consistent with the it has to be consistent with faith and morals. It's consistent with the doctrine of the church. It's something that's prudent or good for the faithful to know about. Like God gives the message to St. Faustina to talk about mercy. He gives the message to St. Margaret Mary Alacoque to talk about Jesus' loving Sacred Heart. The message to the children at Fatima to say, let us pray the prayer for those who are most in need of God's mercy. These are all ways in which there's been this kind of constant drumbeat that we need to be. These prophets have been told by God to talk about mercy and teach us practical devotions about mercy. Why does God want to do that? Why is God putting that idea in front of the church? And partly it's because prophets are usually a little bit ahead of their time. But I think St. Faustina was during the 30s in Poland, like the Nazis were coming. You just finished World War I. Totalitarianism is justice without mercy. The Marxists are justice without mercy, right? So in the same way that the children of Fatima were preparing us for Bolshevism, for the coming of the Soviet Union and all of that totalitarian communism, It was, here's the way, we have this great vision for how we be. We don't need to work. We're all going to just contribute, to each according to his ability and from each according to their need. And like, it's this great, I got that backwards, but it's a great vision for how things ought to be. And we'll throw you in the gulag if you're wrong. That was the 20th century, right? And in some sense, that's our culture today. And so why does God send prophets? It's for our need. And there's probably nothing more that we need. I mean, but we certainly need mercy. And that constant message of mercy is just something we proclaim regularly every day in order to correct for the big mistakes we make in our culture, in our secular culture.
It does suggest that the Christian, even in the political sphere, then can't be just for things that are good, but behaving in the way that the opponent behaves. You can't. Because as you said, like, this attitude today is something like, we're a culture that believes in tolerance and acceptance of everyone, and if you don't go along with that, you're out. To kind of paraphrase what you just said about Bolshevism. So we cannot be just we're pro-life though, and we're pro-family, but we're going to cancel you. We can't. That's profoundly un-Christian.
There's a big a real temptation to do that. And you have, the first reading today from St. Paul says, shun those who will not work. We do have excommunication in the church. That's not like, separate yourself from people who are a danger to you spiritually is a good thing to do sometimes. So some people, they'll take that and they say, they break from the way that God is, right? God tells the Jews to separate from the pagans. Don't hang out with the Egyptians. Don't intermarry at the beginning, because he's trying to separate them from evil. And that's a spiritual temptation of them. But God was never going to didn't cancel the pagans. He wanted to save the Gentiles, as we call them in the New Testament. He wanted to save them also. He sent St. Paul to the Greeks. So even though someone does something wrong, and you might, for your own good or for the good of your family, have to separate from them, in your heart, you still have to have solidarity with them so you can bring them back. And that's part of the difference between the secular is, we're cutting you off, we're throwing you in the gulag, we're executing you, we're canceling you. The Christians is, we might have to separate from you because you're a danger to us, whether physical or spiritual. But at the end of the day, what we want is for you to go to heaven.
Yeah.
And so hopefully this is, we'll separate from you, so we'll be stronger, so we can go out and pick you up on our shoulders and bring you back like the lost sheep. That's
Father Daniel Maloney, our guest. His book is Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know, 888-318-7884. This is one of the great virtues of the book, is that the virtue of mercy is not separated out and made the opponent of the other virtues like truth and goodness and beauty and justice, but is shown to be kind of the cap to all of them, the one that gives all of them their meaning and their direction, a direction that involves reconciliation and wholeness and love and forgiveness and setting all things right. If you have questions about mercy, if you have questions about mercy in your own life, the life of a loved one, or in the life of the world, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. We actually had a caller who had to go, Kim in Illinois, but she had two questions for you, Father, so I will give you her two questions. She wanted to know, how do I receive God's mercy? And she wanted to know, how can I teach that ability to others?
Well, to receive God's mercy isn't that hard until you realize the demands of mercy. Right? To be baptized is to receive God's mercy. To pray and to receive grace is to receive God's mercy, because the fundamental problem, the fundamental wrong that has to be righted is our relationship with sin. But when we realize that God wants us to be even better than we are, no matter how good we are, he wants us to be better. To receive God's mercy, oftentimes we have to sort of examine our own consciences and examine our own hearts and examine how it is that we're the obstacle. The only way that we can cut ourselves off from God's mercy is by not asking for it. But very often, if we say, right, that's the unforgivable sin, is to not ask for forgiveness. And so to not ask for God's mercy means we won't get it. But we don't always want God's mercy if it requires God's discipline. If God's calling us to be perfect, and we sort of say, well, I'm good enough, that's called lukewarmness. So part of what you have to do in order to really accept God's mercy is to really accept God's transforming grace, which means he has to get deep into your soul, and he has to sort of, shine the light on the dark corners where you've swept all the stuff that you don't want him to look at, and turn up the magnification on your heart, and sort of you go, oh my goodness, look at how awful I am. It's one of the great dynamics of saintliness, right? Is that the saints, it's almost like they level up in a video game, and suddenly the bullets are coming faster. They suddenly realize, I thought I was good, and then suddenly I had the spiritual breakthrough, and I realized I got a lot more work to do. And no matter how holy they are, they still realize they have, one saint I remember said he wanted to have on his tombstone just the word sinner. He's a canonized saint in the Catholic Church, but he thought, and it wasn't being falsely pious. He just realized how much more he could do, and how far short he was falling of what his potential was. So, in one level, if you want God's mercy, you want to accept God's mercy, you got to do all that spiritual work to get out of his way and let his grace transform you. To teach that to others is to do it yourself. But then a second is to, I think that St. Faustina's, again, the Jesus, I trust in you. Encourage people over and over again to trust in God, to put aside their own desires to control their future, and instead hand themselves over to God. Remember, the original sin was grasping, controlling. God, if you can eat this fruit, you will be like gods. And so and that's what Jesus says, or St. Paul says in Philippians, is that Jesus did not grasp equality with God, but he instead humbled himself. So to teach people to trust in God is to humble yourself, and say, you died for me on the cross, so therefore it's clear you got my back, and so you got my back in this thing even though I don't see how, and this thing even though I don't see how. And that is to accept God's mercy, to teach people God's mercy, is to teach them that no, they can learn how to trust and give up control over to God.
888-318-7884, our number, 888-31-TRUTH. We're talking about mercy with Father Daniel Maloney. The book is called Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. If there's something you'd like to know about mercy, your call welcome. 888-318-7884.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
St. Paul's street evangelization isn't like other evangelism you might have seen on the streets. We don't yell, and we don't force anyone to pay attention to us. Instead, St. Paul's street evangelization is committed to presenting a positive, passionately Catholic presence to a world hungry for truth. For more information, or to start a chapter of your own, go to www.streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com. It's time to do our part.
He was a pope, a saint, and a doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
Pope St. Gregory I the Great is one of only 4 popes honored as the Great. Among his many achievements was sending missionaries across Northern Europe, especially St. Augustine of Canterbury, who brought Christ to the people of England. In a pun, Pope Gregory called the English people angels. He died in 604.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Father Daniel Maloney, our guest this hour. The book is called Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. It's a good news book, and it will help you put mercy in perspective. And I hope that you will check it out. It's from the Augustine Institute and Ignatius Press. Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884 with your questions or comments for Father Maloney. Before I go back to Father Maloney, however, I am obliged to tell you this. We have a free MP3 for you at shop.catholic.com. It's called How to Talk to Protestants. It's about talking about the faith when you find yourself in a conversation with a Protestant person who might want to challenge some aspect of the Catholic faith, or you hear something said about the Catholic faith that, is not quite right, but you want to know how might you breach that topic with the person. You'll find this talk very helpful. It's a free MP3, How to Talk to Protestants, available now at shop.catholic.com. Our guest, Father Daniel Maloney, we're talking about mercy. The number 888-318-7884. I think this year is a particularly good time for your book. It seems perfectly timed because we've become merciless, and I don't know if it's the anxiety that surrounds this, what's called the culture war, and just the sense that everyone feels like everything's at stake all the time, or this weird intensity that comes with social media outlets where you can have these conversations with people you never see and you never know, and you can accuse them of all kinds of things. All of our worst instincts seem to be catered to and to be flourishing this year. It just seems like a nasty year, and we need some conversation about mercy.
I think that's absolutely right. I wrote the book, last summer, so we weren't thinking about all this sorts of stuff, except that there's always a part of our culture that's agitating for a kind of perfectionist idea of justice.
Yeah.
There's a phrase that's common on college campuses that started making way at the broader culture called microaggression, which is basically socially awkward things regarding a particular topic. So if I accidentally make some comment that makes you feel bad because you're poor, or I ask you, say, what do you do for work? Oh, I'm between jobs. That's called a microaggression, and you've somehow done an injustice. And anyway, people are like, so there's little. I was noticing things like that were all over the place, and they all do have there's a history behind them. But I wasn't thinking about all this sort of stuff. And the book comes out, and bam, here we have everybody. The cancel culture is making the front page of the newspaper. And nobody has solidarity with each other. One of the the cancel culture is kind of an acid that's eating away at what keeps us together. And the more secular. I mean, this is a big difference between kind of secular ways of looking at the way things ought to be. I mean, politics, but also within your family and within society in general. The big difference between secular and non and Catholic is that the Catholics want to maintain solidarity and want everyone to come along with us to heaven. We're never just going to throw people overboard, and that's a real. It saddens me to keep looking to watch the news and watch how no one gets the benefit of the doubt. In some sense, I've started to think of. Like these videos that we take that are 25 seconds long I'm not talking about the ones about the police, but just, we've turned our phones into sort of sources of gossip.
Right.
Right. There's kind of way in which you sort of, if I post something on Facebook that makes you look bad, it's not that different than, did you hear what so-and-so did? I'm just showing you what so-and-so did, but in a curated, edited, partial way that's none of my business to show. It seems like gossip to me. And that's one of those things that eats away at our solidarity, right? The way the gossip always does. St. James in his letter says that the tongue is one of the great instruments of the devil. And same way, I think some ways the cell phone is, Twitter is,
exactly
structures of sin in some ways, right?
Right.
So that's, I think, it's a real. The more I watch the news, I don't watch the news that much because it depresses me. But when I do, I keep thinking they should read. I don't know if they should read my book, but we need mercy. So more people who do read my book should be able to bring it.
They should read your book. I think you were right. They should read the book.
Okay.
The book is Mercy, by the way, what every Catholic should know. Our guest is Father Daniel Maloney. On the line, Vince in Toronto, Canada. Don't give him a book. Watching on YouTube Live. Vince in Toronto, your question for Father Maloney.
Hey, Father Malone. Big fan of the show, guys, by the way. I have a quick just explanation and then the question right away. So I know in the Bible that God when he was talking to the demons, how they wanted to go into the swine of the pigs. Like I think he basically showed them mercy by doing that. Like, my basic question is, does the Father show mercy towards the demons and Lucifer in any way? And do they take advantage of that mercy so they continue to cause like negative things, or how does that work?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is yes, he does. Not everyone believes me on this, so but I think so. If you think about what are God's options with regard to the devil and other demons, to the fallen angels, he can't let them into heaven for reasons but what he can do is he can sort of punish them, or he can annihilate them. Like, he can either contain them in hell, right, which is kind of like a jail, or he can simply snap his fingers, not his fingers, but he could just sort of decide to make them cease to exist, which would be sort of the cosmic equivalent of the death penalty. And so the fact that he doesn't do the worst thing he could do to them, but instead gives them some sort of existence and allows them to, even though they're punished, he doesn't say, I've canceled you so much that you no longer exist. You still exist, just that now you're in hell. There's a sense in which there's a theological precept, which is that it's always better to be than not to be. And so so then God even then uses the demons in his plan. I like that J.R. Tolkien has his great sort of depiction of the way God uses the devil by imagining a song where one voice starts to go off on his own away from the conductor. And the skilled conductor, that's the devil who's going off in his own way, and the skilled conductor then changes the theme of the music to incorporate the discord into a greater harmony. And that's, of course, the way that God uses the devil, is that even though the devil tempts Adam and Eve, the same way that the devil himself was tempted, and Adam and Eve fall, and that's not great. If they passed the test, it would have been better. But he then uses the punishment that the devil gives for his own purposes, and he uses the powers of hell against Jesus to lead to the crucifixion, to lead to our resurrection. There's a sense in which he's incorporating everything, even evil, into a greater good. He decides to use that somehow. So anyway, so God, so Jesus, when he directs the demons into the pigs rather than, again, deciding to annihilate them, is in some sense, not doing the worst he could to them. So that's and with you can't really rehabilitate demons. They're in hell. They're gone. But they're still your creatures if you're God, and so you don't completely want to get rid of them. They still are. They're not the black sheep in the family, if you will, right? So there's a certain kind of solidarity still by keeping them alive and treating them with something less than the full force of annihilation, which I think is the worst thing you can do. At least that's my theological opinion.
So, but for us though, does God sometimes? There's a way in which His mercy can be harsh in that sometimes He allows us to suffer things, and that's not like the suffering of the demons. It's a different kind of thing. It's the corrective suffering. Right.
Well, there's two kinds of suffering that He does. First, he has to incapacitate us from doing more evil than, he has to control the amount of evil that we do so that we don't ruin everything. And then, so there's a kind of suffering that happens with that. And then there's secondly a kind of suffering that happens to make us grow stronger. So think of the flood, right? The flood at the beginning of the book of Genesis. That was to wipe out all those sons and daughters of Cain who were doing evil. Like, it was too great for God to be able to say he needed some people who were going to be not totally on the wrong path. So to protect Noah, he wipes out everybody else. And again, God is doing that sort of curating. So with us, he'll do that too. But when it comes to, so sometimes he has to actually sort of say, no, I'm going to punish you and separate you from me forever in hell, because if you were to go to heaven, you would ruin heaven.
For everybody else.
for everybody else. You don't want Hitler to be in heaven being Hitler. You want Hitler to, if he's ever made it to heaven, he have to be a saint to be there, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also the kind of discipline that a father does to his children to make them grow and mature. And that's what God does for us.
It takes a long time to learn to appreciate that one.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a while, but it is a mercy when God corrects us. All of a sudden, time is up. Father Daniel Maloney, author of Mercy, What Every Catholic Should Know. Thank you so much. I very, very much appreciate the hour.
Thanks for having me. It's very great to be here.
I hope we'll be able to do it again. Scott Weeman's next. We're going to talk about addiction, a perfect follow-up to an hour on Mercy. We'll talk about addiction from a Catholic perspective right after this. Yeah, when I say somebody's a friend to Catholic Answers, that's real. They're our friend. Scott Weeman's our friend. He comes by here. He lives near here, and he wrote a great book called The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. He is a man in recovery himself, and he's helping all sorts of people do that through his nonprofit organization, I should say the nonprofit organization that he founded called Catholic in Recovery. It's great to see you again, Scott Weeman. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Ty. It's great to be back.
If you got questions about addiction and recovery, and you'd like the Catholic perspective, this hour is for you. You're welcome to call, whether it's about yourself or someone else, 888-318-7884. It might perhaps your child or a parent or another relative, someone at work, or as I said, yourself. If you'd like some help with addiction questions, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. And if you get on the line today and you talk with Scott, don't hang up right away, because Marie's going to get your information, and we're going to send you a copy of his book, The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. So, Scott, I just want to start by asking you about this, because I do think those of us who have bad habits or bad tendencies, or I'm one of these people who I go through cycles, and I can cycle down sometimes into my bad habits. It seems like the COVID period aggravated us. We're not doing as well. As a matter of fact, a few months ago, you might have found a much svelter me had you come in here. So you could just see where I'm going with this. Like, you definitely would have found a much svelter me. So, and so then you feel terrible, and then you're going through this cycle, and you're like, I'm here again, and I didn't ever want to be here again. And so, any words about, are you experiencing the same thing? Like people saying to you, look, I was over my alcoholism, and I'm struggling in a way that I haven't before because of this, or whatever else the addiction might be. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, absolutely. So
that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah, a lot of grace, but also a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of risk factors for addiction in the moment.
Like isolation, I suppose, is one of them.
Huge.
Absolutely. Huge risk factor. Yeah.
So personal isolation, we are dependent upon, we're communal social creatures, and we're dependent upon each other for that. And so isolation, which kind of then keeps us in our thoughts a little bit more than we probably should be. And, we're not consulting with other people, maybe not consulting with God as often in some of our decision making.
Yeah.
Big risk factor. Economic fear, uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
Anxiety.
Yeah, the anxiety, right. We medicate that, or we deal with it through whatever our addiction is.
Absolutely. So I think we're naturally restless people. St. Augustine said, we are restless, and we are made for thee. And so now you add a bunch more restlessness onto that, and we seek comforts. We seek, different, probably cheap coping mechanisms for dealing with that.
Right.
Or we turn to God.
And Hostess sells them.
Yes. Yes.
So does Jack Daniels and everybody else.
That's right.
Oops, what happened? 888-318-7884, our number. If you'd like to talk to Scott Weeman, 888-318-7884. No, I just unplugged my headphones for a second. That's Don't make me explain it on the air, Nick. Wait till the breaks. I'll explain it then. Scott Weeman, our guest, is the author of The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. I've asked you this before, but I just want to go back to this. I mean, this pairing of the 12 Steps and the Sacraments, to your mind, this is a quite natural and comfortable pairing.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, comfortable, natural, I think it's just really merging experience found in 12-step recovery and the sacramental life of the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And the movement is very similar, whereas we start with this place of desperation and admitting our powerlessness in some ways, as per step one, that our lives have become unmanageable, then coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves, we'll call God, can restore us to sanity, and then turning our will and our lives over to the care of Him. So those, much like a kind of a baptism, but the fullness of baptism, I think. So we think of baptism as white lights and garments, and this being made pure. And Jesus, we know Jesus identified as the beloved Son of God, or a beloved Son of God, with whom He's well pleased at His own baptism. Part of the movement is finding our identity as beloved sons or daughters of God,
right?
Which is a challenge for one who is coming into recovery, or coming into this new day with the challenges of addiction. The cunning, baffling, and powerful nature of addiction keeps us from really understanding that identity in many ways. And so part of the solution is to admit powerlessness, that we need a Savior, And Jesus also refers to a baptism with which he must be baptized, and how great is his anguish until he achieves it, which
Right.
referring often to his death as well. And so I think that when we submit ourselves to our baptism or embrace our baptism, that we're not only just shining a light on the beauty, the perfection, the purity of it, but we're also recognizing really the stain of original sin and our seal, our identity as God's in many ways. So there's kind of this back and forth there. So part of that is, baptism. Steps 4 through 9 in the 12 steps are embraced and encompass the fullness of the sacrament of reconciliation. In step 4, we make a thorough moral inventory of ourselves.
You have to do that on Saturday morning before you go to church.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then step 5, admit to God, ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, much like a confession.
Right.
And then through the rest, steps 6 and 7, ask God to remove whatever defects of character stand in our way of serving him and others. Step 8, we make a list of all persons we had harmed, become willing to make amends to them all. And then in step 9, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Much like the fullness of reconciliation, the preparation,
right,
the act, the humility, and then the penance, or just re-engaging or bringing healing to relationships that we've caused harm to.
And the sacraments, what happens in the 12 steps in your experience is effective. It actually occasions change that can be permanent and helpful to people in their lives.
Yes,
miracles. And that's what the sacraments do as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Oh my gosh, already a bunch of people on the line, 888-318-7884. I got one more question. All you people on the phone, I got one more question for Scott, and then I'll let you talk to him, all right? And that's this. Okay, a lot of 12-step stuff, though, and a lot of what you do in the whole Catholic recovery movement that you're leading is people meeting in person. So what's going on now that you've got the COVID?
Yeah, so we have about 35 Catholic in recovery groups in 10 different states around the U.S. And those meet in person. They were meeting in person until some social distancing restrictions took place.
Right.
Some are now meeting in person depending on state location. But in March, when this all hit, we immediately began virtual meetings. So people meeting online via video conferencing technology and giving opportunities for people who otherwise don't live near a Catholic in Recovery fellowship to be a part of our fellowship and our ministry and attend regular meetings. So we have throughout the week 4 different general recovery meetings available for people impacted by a variety of addictions: alcoholism, drug addiction, compulsive overeating, compulsive restrictive eating, gambling, pornography, and sex, you name it. Also 2 meetings available for family and friends impacted by a loved one's addiction.
Wow.
That also includes people who are adult children of alcoholics, people that struggle with codependency, and then 3 groups Monday, Wednesday, and Friday available for men struggling with lust addiction.
And so in a certain way, it's actually open to more people. I mean, I guess it's, if you wanted to get on an airplane and come, you could have come before, but it's so much easier to make a virtual meeting.
That's right.
And it's working.
It is. And
That's cool.
I think that there's a give and take there. It's certainly much more convenient. It gives anyone across the world the opportunity to connect. We have people in Asia, North and South America, Europe, Africa that are participating in our Catholic in Recovery meetings pretty regularly. So it's awesome to see and experience a variety of different cultural experiences and just wisdom from all over the world. And, there's a convenience factor to it, but there's also something about being in person with someone, just being face to face. Part of it is kind of taking the courage to attend your first meeting, be in front of people. Now, that's a little bit achieved by being anonymous in front of a blank screen with maybe a fake name or something like that. But there's something about just building the courage or giving God the opportunity to give us the courage to get in the car, drive to the place, get out of the car, walk into a room full of strangers, and admit that we need help. There's a lot of grace that's found in there. And so, that's missed in a virtual setting, but there's a give and take.
The number again, 888-318-7884. Lines are filling up quickly, but there's 2 lines open for you if you want to get through. Scott Wieman is our guest. He's the author of a book called The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. He's also the founder of the nonprofit organization Catholic in Recovery, which is helping people all over the world. he even explained to me that there are 6 continents on the planet Earth. And oh no, maybe there's you probably don't have anything going in Antarctica though.
Not that I know of.
No,
yet.
so there's 6 that you're on. Okay, you can talk to him here if you have questions about your own recovery, about how the sacraments may play a part in your own recovery, or if you have questions about family members, whatever. Scott's willing to help you. So just call if you got a question, you need some help. 888-318-7884. Take a quick break. We'll be right back with your questions for Scott. A few minutes each week with our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus, will help you understand and defend your Catholic faith like a boss. Get it wherever you get your podcasts or listen anytime at CatholicAnswersFocus.com. We Catholics just celebrated the Assumption and Coronation of Mary, so we asked Father Hugh about these important feasts, and he ended up telling us some really cool things about Mary going to heaven and being crowned queen. Also this week, the Catholic Church teaches that our justification, which can also be called getting right with God, is not a one-time thing but a process. But the letter to the Romans seems to imply that our justification might just be a one-time event. Carlo Broussard explains the truth about what St. Paul taught and why the Catholic Church gets this one right. Catholic Answers Focus is free, brand new twice a week, and now available on YouTube.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Ever wonder how we should pray? I'd like to offer just one. Don't make prayer your work, make work your prayer. In other words, one's faithfulness to their daily duties of state and life and vocation, while at home and at their place of employment, can be offered as a pleasing sacrifice to God when done lovingly, faithfully, and well. It all boils down to the virtue of diligence, doesn't it? Do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, in the way it's supposed to be done.
Feeling better already having Scott Weeman here. Scott is the author of The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. That's part of it, isn't it? Just knowing that you're not alone when you're struggling with things.
Absolutely.
It's
it
a big
can
deal.
feel alone, especially if you're a family member impacted by a loved one's addiction.
Yeah.
Or if you are struggling with your own addiction, it can feel incredibly lonely. So part of the solution is really being a part of fellowship, the body of Christ, helping heal the body of Christ.
Praise God. Praise God. Let's go to Becky in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Becky, thank you so much for your call, your question for Scott Weeman.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for tonight. My question is, I'm a mother. My son's 45. He went through his divorce in January. He's been battling alcoholism for many years, probably 20-some years. But my question is, he binges. He went to rehab, got back from rehab in February, and this is his second time rehab. Then he had went prior, but and he's living in my basement, and I have a big enough basement for him because when he lived in this apartment and he was binging, he was alone, and I thought I would just go find him dead, and I said I would rather him be with me. I didn't want him to die alone. Mm-hmm. So he quit his job, because of his drinking, and he had a great job. But anyway, long story short, it's been causing friction with my husband, who's not his dad, he's just his stepdad, but he's been there for him. But now he says it's time for my son to, get up and do something and help himself. And my son's not just battling alcohol, he's battling depression, he was molested, he was abandoned by his father, many things that he's troubled with. So it's not just alcohol. He says, I'm enabling him, he's not going to get any help, but yet he does listen to me. He does come up, he does say he wants help, then he'll drink, and then he'll stop. It's like this now every other day, or maybe 2 days no drinking, then third day he will, and then 3, 4 more days.
Well, let's get Scott to give a bit of feedback.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling, Becky, and thanks for sharing. That sounds really challenging and really painful. I'm curious, what is he drinking at home?
Yes, he's drinking in the basement.
Okay.
And because I'd rather him drink here than drink and drive his vehicle, so I said, if you're going to die, I know this sounds morbid as a mother, but I said I don't want you to die alone, and at least you're here with me. That's the reason why I have him here.
Yeah.
He's got children,
Okay.
And everything. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like a pretty typical alcoholic, a little Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, being pleasant at times and being probably incredibly self-centered or, focused on just feeding the disease of alcoholism. And it sounds like you've created a home, or he's got an environment where his addiction or his alcoholism is able to just thrive until perhaps death. And so you've got to ask yourself a question: are you willing to? I mean, you basically have. It sounds like almost come to a place where you're inevitably waiting for him to die, which sounds really sad. And I know that's not where you're at, but it sounds like you've come to the conclusion that you'd rather have him die at your house than to die alone. I'm curious, what does your gut tell you, Becky?
Well, my gut tell me is this, that we're very. He's a devout Catholic, and he goes to confession. And there is a priest here in Fort Wayne that said he wants to see him, and that he would, and so he has his phone number, and it's just taking that step. But I asked my son, I go, what can I do to help you? What can we do to help you? And he says, Mom, I just got to do this myself. It's and I can't. My husband says we got to tell him to get out. And well, first of all, we said he could come here, and now we're kicking him out. And and if that's what I'm supposed to do, then so be it. But somebody direct me on how do I do this.
Well, I want to let you off the hook, Becky, for the pressure or the feeling, the expectation of being of handling the situation perfectly. This is a really challenging situation that involves a lot of trauma and a lot of repeated patterns. And there's an opportunity now where if you're ready to surrender or ready for something different, it sounds like you might be enabling him a bit. I mean, like I mentioned, it sounds like a lot of decisions that are being made in your household are being made to keep the disease of alcoholism alive and well. And you're afraid, and I completely understand that as a parent, to let go and to let whatever might happen. And he may even have some further he might have to go further down the hole before he recognizes that, it's time to make a change. It's time to pull out that phone number that I have in my phone, or it's time to admit to someone else that I have a problem. But right now it sounds like he doesn't have too much of a reason to quit, to do that. He's lost his job, or he quit his job, and he's comfortable at home. So I think that, if you've got to ask yourself the question, and it's not up to him, but it's up to you, Becky. Are you willing to set boundaries in your relationship with him that will not be defined by the disease of alcoholism, but be defined by your love for him? And if that's the case, then you might have to set some boundaries, either setting boundaries and rules if he's going to stay home, perhaps not drinking at home, and if he does, have a very clear list of consequences. And so setting expectations is a really very important part, in setting boundaries, incredibly important, both physical boundaries, spiritual boundaries for yourself. You've got to be able to live your own life, Becky, and it sounds like both you, him, your husband are all really challenged by this situation, and his alcoholism is given free rein to keep going.
Okay, Becky?
Okay.
God bless you,
All right.
sister. Thank you for the call.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Scott Weeman is our guest. We're talking addiction. We'd like to help you with the Catholic approach to addiction, and we trust Scott in that regard. He's the author of the book, The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. And he's also the founder of Catholic in Recovery, which you can find just by Googling it, I'm sure. Just go to Catholic in Recovery and Google. Or is there a better way?
CatholicInRecovery.com.
That's even easier. I probably should have asked you before I started
Google
talking.
first.
All right. I better go to another call. Show my ignorance. Matt. Oh, Matt in Australia. Listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. I always like it when these Australians call. Hi, Matt in Australia. Your question for Scott Weeman.
Hey, Si. Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Oh, it's our friend Matt, all the way from out in Perth.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
So I do have a question.
Okay.
I was just wondering, how do you journey with someone who knows that they have an addiction, and they know that it's not right, but they are not yet wanting to overcome their addiction?
So they know it's not right, and they keep doing it, and they don't really want to stop.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like there's not much that you can do. You might be able to pray for willingness to be willing. You might be able to pray that he may have some kind of, awakening or some opportunity to realize the depths of the trouble that he's found himself in. And without knowing much more detail other than that, I would suggest, I mean, there's a lot of things that I do that I know that are not right, but I continue to do. And, I find rationalizations and justifications for them. And some of them may be, more dangerous than others. And usually I change that behavior when I, come to realize that the benefit of the behavior is outweighed by the consequences of the behavior. But oftentimes we have to the consequences have to exceedingly outweigh the benefits of the behavior, because we can often, denial is a really strong force that's going to show itself throughout any kind of addiction. And so, denial, and that can look at a variety of different ways. There can be, not wanting to be reminded of the necessary medicine that we need to take, if you will. There's a lot of different ways that denial can stop us. So, I would suggest that just to love your friend, just to be a presence with your friend, be available to him, perhaps allow him to see the consequences, but you can't change his will. You can't necessarily change. And if you do try to, continue to push him towards something, unless he's asked that well, this is kind of a weird situation because it sounds like he recognizes that there's a problem but doesn't want to change it. So you might be able to team up with him and share with him how you've experienced the challenges that he's going through, or the addictions, how it's affected you. And that requires some pretty honest feedback. But, that's such a gift. We often are so inclined not to offend anyone. But if done lovingly and charitably, just giving someone honest feedback about how their behavior is affecting you can be incredibly valuable, and perhaps move him to realize, the full consequences of his behaviors. And that might help prompt some action or some movement.
How does all this strike you, Matt?
Yeah, no, that's very insightful. I'll give that a try. But yeah, definitely will pray for them still.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you hang on the line, because Marie's going to get your information, because Scott wants to send you. Scott's willing to send books all the way to Australia, so he'll send you a copy of the book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments. With Matt's question, I do I'll just say in my own life, with those people who I know who have an addiction, I sometimes have the thought, and maybe this is a bad thought, I don't know. Be honest with me. How am I going to feel if something bad happens to them and I didn't do enough and I didn't say enough? Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Is that a wrong way to think about it, or?
I think that's pretty natural.
Okay.
So I wouldn't label it as wrong.
All right.
But I would also label it as that worry. I mean, you can try to move that towards some kind of actionable item.
Yeah.
But if you're just sitting around worrying, that's not doing you any good. It's not doing them any good. And in fact,
but I'm really good at that.
Inserting yourself, that can lead to some resentment. And if if your relationship with the person is simply around trying to get them help, then that puts them in that's more or less a pretty hierarchical relationship as well.
Yeah.
I would suggest a relationship that's standing side by side. For example, I get a couple of friends, like reports, like internet search reports, and they're not always pretty. And, so oftentimes I'll send an email, like I'll get the report once a week, and it'll show that someone's been, browsing through something that they shouldn't be browsing through, pornography. And so then I'll send them a message that says, how are you doing, or what's going on? And they may or may not be willing to engage that conversation. But if my only reaction or my only communication with that person is about how they need to stop looking at pornography and take some action, that's not really a friendship anymore. That's more or less that's just a relationship that's going to lead to resentment and a lack of intimacy.
Okay, that's very helpful, Scott. You are helpful. Matt, thanks so much for the call. And I don't know how long it takes stuff to get to Australia, but I can tell you this: the postal system is working great in America, so there won't be a problem on our end. Let's go to Kathleen. That was a little joke. Was that a bad joke? All right, Kathleen in South Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. You are up next. Kathleen, your question for Scott Wieman. Oh, hang on, Kathleen. Push the wrong button.
Oh.
Go ahead, Kathleen. Your question.
Okay, thank you. I'm moving my 90-year-old father in with me in about 8 weeks, and with me and my husband. And I grew up in a very traumatic, alcohol-abused childhood. So he doesn't have a car, he doesn't get out, but I think he mail orders alcohol currently, living alone, seriously. So I guess I'm just wondering, do you have suggestions, guidelines? I just kind of feel like he should not be alone at this stage in his life, and I love him, and he needs to be with us. But I also realize there's going to be things that come up that I don't think of today.
Thanks for calling,
So-
Kathleen.
Okay.
You mentioned alcohol-related abuse in your family or alcohol-related trauma as a child. Was that instigated by your father?
That is my father.
Okay.
And alcoholism is not acceptable to use because he could give it up for 40 days of Lent anytime he wanted, and that's he's Irish. That's his attitude, so he doesn't have a problem. But there was a problem. I mean, as a child, I didn't know that, but looking back, it's like certainly we have all been affected by the problem.
I hate to do this to you, but this is a hard break. I can't go around it. So you gotta hang on a second, and Scott will continue to address your question, Kathleen. Just hang on a minute, and we'll be right back. Scott Weeman is our guest. The book is the 12 Steps and the Sacraments. Your calls welcome. 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Why does everyone need to be saved? Does the Bible say we're saved by faith alone and not by works? What does the Catholic Church teach about heaven, hell, and purgatory? In 20 Answers Salvation, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, laying out the beautiful story of how God calls us out of sin, justifies us, makes us holy, and leads us to everlasting life with Him. 20 Answers Salvation is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
To many people, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the Church. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I'll give you the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Dr. David Anders. Does the problem of evil keep you from believing in God?
Join us for Call to Communion tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Scott Weeman, our good friend, who is not on enough, and it's my fault, Scott. I apologize for that. Got to call you more. When you're on, I just am so happy that you're here. You can call and ask Scott questions about addiction from a Catholic perspective. He's the author of The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. He's the founder of Catholic in Recovery, which you can find at CatholicInRecovery.com.
Yes.
CatholicInRecovery.com. And now they're doing a whole bunch of stuff that's virtual meetings, and so you can get help that way if meetings are inaccessible to you. In other ways, it's a great thing. They've actually had to speed that up because of the COVID-19 situation, and that's a little bit of God's grace that it got speeded up.
Absolutely.
We're talking with Kathleen in South Dakota. Her father's 90 years old, drinking, and she wants some. He says he's not an alcoholic because he can give up alcohol for Lent every year.
Yep. Well,
so.
I mean, we can define it however we want to define it.
Apparently, the definition of alcoholism is drink all you want all year, just don't drink during Lent.
Exactly.
As long as I don't know.
And I'm not one to ever diagnose someone as an alcoholic or an addict, or some people are just opposed to those words, whatever. Denial is a very powerful force, and we'll probably mention that again and again and again.
Right.
That, we don't want to take an honest look at ourselves, and so that's why oftentimes we don't see people taking action to change until they've hit this really rock bottom, this really devastating place where then God's grace can emerge and His mercy is powerful and can skyrocket us into a new kind of existence and a new life, and really finding mercy and finding new life. So back to Kathleen. Kathleen, I'm curious what your feelings are about this. What hesitations you might hold about having your father join you at home.
Kathleen?
Hello?
Oh, sorry. I don't know what the problem was there, Kathleen, but go ahead.
Okay. I have been praying for healing in my family probably for about 16 years, and I just feel like I just see like my youngest brother is back in the Catholic Church, and I mean things have just happened that would just make me leap for joy. So I feel fine myself, and I mean I am not nearly as broken as I used to be. So I feel very good and comfortable, and it is the right thing to do. He's 90 years old. He should not be alone. And my other sibling, I have 7 other siblings, but I just happen to be the right one at the time, and we have room for him. But he is kind of to the point where, I mean, he's 90. He'll be, like, so cute, and he's never been cute in my life. He's been very harsh and such. Or he can be, in 3 seconds, a complete bully, and that is how it is. So I think I have a little bit of that, like no nonsense, not doing it, and I don't want to approach him like that. So I just think my focus is going to be praying about this daily and just getting, not getting through it. I want to enjoy my years with him. His mother lived to 100 too, so I expect this to be a long-term project.
Well, let's let Scott respond.
Yeah. Praise God, Kathleen, for the healing that you found in your life. It sounds like God has really moved you and others that you love to some really awesome places. So praise God for that. I've got questions for back to you, but I'll try to just respond. I'm curious if other of your siblings have been impacted by abuse or have been abused by your father as well.
Oh, we are all the same in different ways, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Because oftentimes there can be this deep kind of passion within someone who has been abused by a parent that it's their burden to reconcile the relationship, that there's this place in their heart that they need to, in order to find wholeness or completeness in themselves, they need to both get approval from the parent and they need to be kind of the healing force for the family member. And so I would just be cautious about that and be aware of that. You're asking a great question. What boundaries should I set? And that's, without knowing the fullness of the situation, I think that setting boundaries are important, and being definitive and being predictable and being consistent with those boundaries is going to make your presence and your ability to just enjoy your time with your father a lot more clear. I would recommend to you to participate in some kind of a group, a family-related group. There's a group called Adult Children of Alcoholics, who it sounds like you certainly fit the category and can find a lot of healing and a lot of just personal experience from others who can share how their life has been shifted and has been formed and has been informed by past relationship as a child with an adult alcoholic, or now as an adult, but previously as a child of an alcoholic. There's a lot of grace and a lot of fruit that can come from that. I'd also invite you to find one of our family and friends meetings, Catholic in Recovery meetings, which happen, if you're in South Dakota, that's Central Time, I don't know, but Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, and on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time, we have family and friends Catholic in Recovery meetings where you can hear experiences from other people who have been in similar situations, who are impacted by the addiction of a loved one, or in many cases the loved ones get well, but then the family members who are impacted by the addict, they haven't taken on their own recovery journey, and so there can also be resentment there where they see the one who has caused pain becoming well, but they're still living with patterns that are really ordered around the presence of an addiction. So I would strongly recommend getting plugged into some kind of fellowship that can bring a little bit of experience and bring others together, find wisdom from others who have been in your situation.
Okay, Kathleen?
And stay on the line as we
Thank
want to
you.
send you a copy of my book.
Will you hang on the line? We'll send you a copy of the book. And yeah, do check out CatholicInRecovery.com, CatholicInRecovery.com. Thank you, Kathleen. We're talking about addiction and recovery today with our resident expert here in San Diego County. He's the author of the 12 Steps. You don't like that being called the resident. You're like, I guess this is something where everybody's on a journey, huh? You don't want to be...
You know, I've written a book, and I get to sit here next to you, Si, so
Yeah.
I'll take expert status, although it's not deserved.
Okay, fair enough. The book is called The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. The organization is called Catholic in Recovery. It's not a replacement for a 12-step meeting or a program. It's a Catholic kind of supplement to whatever else you're doing in your recovery, whether that's a medical intervention or a talking intervention or whatever other intervention it is. Jesus wants to meet you in the Catholic Church too, and he loves you, and Scott wants to help put you in contact with that.
And we found many people since March who have been sober, who have found sobriety, recovery, abstinence kind of defined differently per different programs, but who, you know, in March or in April found this, you know, if I don't do something different, I'm going to die. And
Yeah.
so, you know, people have been plugging in and getting acquainted and participating in Catholic in Recovery meetings regularly. There's some people that I see nearly every day in our Catholic in Recovery meetings and are reporting sobriety of, you know, we just celebrated a woman who's 90 days sober, you know.
Praise God.
Another, you know, and it's not just alcohol and drugs. In fact, one thing that's really revealing since I started Catholic in Recovery is that I would say we think of addicts as being someone under a bridge, someone who's homeless or someone who's an
Right.
alcoholic, drunk, can't walk, or a drug addict. But there's a silent addiction that looms within our culture, compulsive overeating and restrictive eating, which is often not discussed. But we have probably just as many people who attend Catholic in Recovery meetings who are compulsive overeaters,
Wow.
or restrictive eating, or, you know, anorexic, bulimic, and find life through fellowship, through Catholic 12-step fellowship. In fact, one woman emailed me last night saying, "Thank you, Scott, you're saving my life." And
Praise God for that, Scott. That's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Praise
and
God.
you know, the thing that I do think we're so loath to remember about Jesus is, of the three things he did, one of them is healing. He wants to heal people. He goes around healing, and sometimes we're like, nah, you know, he won't heal me. He didn't. He will. He wants to.
Yeah, there's so in the second step of recovery, we say we came to believe that power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, which is another word for sanity is wholeness. And Jesus kind of uses that term. He says shalom. After his resurrection, he comes back, he sees the apostles. They're all afraid for fear of the Jews, and they're going to be next. And Jesus enters amongst them, and what does he do? He shows them his wounds. He leads with his wounds, and he says a message of peace. Peace be with you. Shalom. And that's how healing happens. Is in recovery, it's the ones who have found the hope, who were once in a place of utter hopelessness, who can lead with this message of, here are my wounds. Peace be with you.
Man, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. 888-318-7884, the number. And if you get through, stay on the line, because we're going to send you Scott's book. Well, Scott's going to send it to you. Dolores in Frostville, Tennessee, listening to EWTN Channel 130 on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. You are next, Dolores. Your question for Scott.
I just really want to encourage the woman that called the first time about her son that's been living with her, that's 45 years old. My daughter was an addict for 20-something years on speed and meth, and I became a Catholic about a year and a half ago, and I started asking the church to pray right away for her. And about 60 days ago, she got sick, walked into my bedroom, and said, "Mom, it's gone. It's gone. The desire has been lifted." And she is doing wonderful. Her personality's gone back to being amazing. She's walking it out, and I know it's because of the faith of the Catholic people that has been praying and interceding for her. And I just want to encourage that lady. And also I want to tell Mr. Weedman that if he would send her a book, I would really appreciate it so she can learn. I've been trying to explain to her about the Catholic Church and what I'm learning and experiencing, and the graces that I've received, and she's seen it. And now I want her to understand that there's a program like this for her.
All right, Scott. What do you
Praise
think?
God.
Yeah.
Awesome, Dolores. Thank you for sharing.
That was beautiful, Dolores. Why don't you hang on, and we'll send the book to you. I don't know if she was asking for two books, though. Maybe she
Give us 2 addresses. We'll send 2 books.
All right. Whoa, Scott Moneybags Weeman, willing to send books to anybody who wants one. The book is called The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. The organization that Scott founded is called Catholic in Recovery. Jesus does want you to be recovered, to be healed, to be whole. He wants that for all of us, whatever the thing may be. Well, I mean, we talk sometimes, probably not enough, but we did, about the pornography thing. But my goodness, because of the not social media, but just the internet access.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this whole population of men who have this secret shame that they live in, a horrible secret shame. And you're helping people through that too.
Incredibly high numbers. If we were aware of how much of a percentage of our population, of our culture.
Right.
And Catholics are not immune just because we're Catholics or Christian. It does not make us immune to the devastating effects of addiction.
Right.
We might think that it does, but it certainly doesn't. So addiction does not discriminate. There has been people spend more time on a pornography website, which I will not name, than they do collectively on Netflix and Amazon. Think about that.
Man, that's because I hate to say it, but I spend a lot of time on Netflix and Amazon.
Exactly.
Like that, cumulatively, that's, and it's because it's compulsive behavior.
Yes.
It's because you can't get off of it.
It's cunning, baffling, and powerful.
Yeah.
And it's not just a men's issue either. And so I'm going to take some responsibility for kind of continuing the cultural expectation that it is just a men's issue. We don't have a women's pornography or lust addiction recovery meeting yet, largely because we don't have someone to lead that group. If you are experienced and have found recovery from lust addiction and are a woman, please email me, scott@catholicinrecovery.com, as we, I've been praying to God to help this. But there is not, women are equally affected by lust and pornography addiction, but we don't talk about it because it's too shameful to do so. And so our silence on that topic also leads to even further stigma and further challenge to begin that conversation.
Yeah, and we've got a book here. What's the name of the book at Catholic Answers? God Loves You? You Are Loved. Yeah, we'll give you that one too. You Are Loved is a great one on that.
Yeah.
We have to take a break. The sense of hope, I think, that comes from knowing other people struggle, other people do in fact find healing, and the healer himself is Jesus Christ. He doesn't leave anybody out of his will for healing. I think you and I both agree on that.
Absolutely.
Right? So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. Scott Weeman, The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. Your calls are welcome at 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I have a very hard time sometimes, and I'm so frustrated. I mean, frustrated. Somebody says, "How'd you do all this, Mother?" I say, "I didn't." And they look at me, "Huh?" The Lord did it. God does everything. Without me, He said, you do nothing.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're talking addiction and recovery, and the more we talk about it, the more I just realize we got to do this more often. We got to have Scott Weeman here more often. The 12 Steps and the Sacraments is his book, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. The organization that he founded is called Catholic in Recovery. You can find it at catholicinrecovery.com, or you can just call us here at 888-318-7884. You were just mentioning that the Feast of St. Monica is tomorrow.
Yes. So we've had a few mothers calling in, and the mother's love for a son or for a daughter kills me. It brings me life. And so tomorrow is the feast day of St. Monica.
Those are opposite things, by the way.
They are. I know.
Okay, just 1 minute.
So, and then the day following, her son, St. Augustine's feast day is the 28th of August. So let's look at, devotions to the saints, or how we can include the saints
Right.
into our understanding. St. Monica prayed for 18 years for the conversion of her son Augustine and shed a lot of tears and went through a lot of sorrow, but continually and persistently prayed to God for the conversion of her son.
Right, right. And what a pair they are, too.
Absolutely.
What a pair of great saints. Let's go to Carol in Ohio, listening on Real Presence Radio. Carol in Ohio, your question for Scott Weeman.
Hi. My 87-year-old father is addicted to pornography. He doesn't see it as wrong. He has said in the past it's not hurting anyone, which when he said that in the past, I tell him it is. He's not Catholic. I'm a convert. He used to go to church when he was a kid, but hasn't been to church in a long time. He's got other problems too. He's obsessive compulsive and other things. He's getting more and more frail, and when I go visit him, he lives 2 hours away. I go visit him a couple times a month, and he covers up the videotapes or the DVDs that are there. My question is, what should I do for him? What can I do for him? I'm just worried about his soul.
That's a challenging position for a daughter to be put in.
All right, very much so.
Carol, thanks for calling. I would, I'm curious if, it sounds like you've had some conversations with him as he's shared with you that he doesn't see it as hurting anyone else. Can you describe a little bit about what those conversations have been like?
Well, most of the conversations are through my brother. For many, many years, he would not allow me to go upstairs in his townhouse to clean or do anything. And my brother told me this because there's all these DVDs all over the place and magazines and stuff. And so I wasn't aware of how bad it was until about a year or two ago. So he ended up in the hospital after falling, and he had to get at-home care, PT, and so I needed to clean up. And so I told him while he was in the hospital, I said, Dad, I've got to clean up everything. I need to go upstairs. I need to clean up. And he said that was fine. So I put all this stuff in bins, and I had one conversation with him after that, and I said, you know that's wrong. Do you need help? No, I don't really look at it that much anymore, that kind of thing. But that's the only conversation I've had with him. My brother both of us are pretty much disgusted with it, but at the same time, he's got a lot of mental problems, and so,
You have compassion as well, it sounds like.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like it sounds like he is under the assumption that this isn't hurting anyone. And you're telling me, and as it makes sense, this hurts you. And so I wonder what it would be like for you to have that conversation with him to say, Dad, I'm your daughter. I love you. And your use of pornography and even your ownership of pornographic material, it really offends me and makes me concerned for where you're at. I mean, if he's unwilling to make any changes, then that's another conversation. There's not much that you might be able to do other than pray and consider, inviting others to share their concerns, perhaps an intervention of some sorts. But seems like a long, long history of repeated pattern and behavior and some justification, denial, and but I think that it would probably be most effective for him to hear from his daughter that this continued behavior is offensive.
Carol, I know we could talk so much more, but all of a sudden the lines are completely full. I want to try to get as many on with Scott as I can, so I have to keep moving. Please stay on the line. We're going to send you the book. Scott's going to send you the book if you hang on and give your address to Marie. Let's go to John in New Jersey, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio Channel 130. John in New Jersey, your question for Scott Weeman.
Yes. Hi, guys. My son has a gambling addiction. He's 30 years old. He's been gambling since he was about 18, and he just can't give it up. We're Catholic. We're raised him Catholic. He's married, has children. They don't attend Mass. My wife, we pray for him every day that he'll give up this addiction, and it just repeats itself all the time. And I love him, so he always comes to me. Hey, Dad, I'm in trouble, this and that. And then the trouble is too, I enjoy sports. I don't gamble. He enjoys sports. He played sports, and New Jersey has legal gambling. So if you put a ball game on, the commercials are about gambling. So I'm like, this is not good. So the best thing for him is when COVID hit, there was no sports. I'm like, this is great. I don't have to worry about this. But now sports are back, and he just can't.
He can't stop. And so are you looking for some help on what you can do for him?
Yeah,
Okay.
He's had trouble with his wife. She finds out he's gambling. She throws him out of the house. He comes back to us. He's got 2 little kids. Then.
Yep. All right,
Yeah.
Scott.
So I'm curious. I mean, that's kind of what I was wondering. What are the natural consequences that he's faced as a result of his gambling addiction? And it sounds. And have you helped him overcome some of those natural consequences, or prevented him from realizing those consequences?
We've had, but I mean, there's been some times where gambling's legal now in Jersey. Before it wasn't. So he got involved with some pretty shady characters, so to speak. So I, naturally being his father, he came to me, and I'd have to get involved with these people.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times I was on the phone with some of these people, and sometimes they were just like furious, and then other times they would just hang up on me and then say, tell your son, forget it, don't ever talk to us again, this and that. But some of these guys are pretty shady characters. I've had guys, even before he was married, come to my house.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that, and this is a conversation that's going to be increasing around the country as gambling becomes more legalized in other states. And I've struggled with gambling addiction myself. At 18, moved to college, had some free money from college, and wasted it all. This is when the internet poker and online poker came up, and had a lot to repay back. And part of that repaying back was a part of my recovery process. And so you're not alone, John, but I'm also hearing that he's gambling, he's risking it, he gets this incredible high from the thrill of gambling, even though, and that may not even be determined whether he wins or loses, but there's just kind of this behavior. The reward center is really rewarded by gambling because you're not always rewarded. It's kind of unpredictable. So there's something that's incredibly powerful there. And what I'm hearing is that he's getting into this and then calling you to clean up the mess, and you're dealing with a bunch of guys that you otherwise wouldn't be dealing with to clean up his mess, or his wife gets mad at you, he has to leave the house. It sounds like you've been, I hate to use this word, but enabling his behavior. And I know that's a hard thing to hear, but I would really try to set strong boundaries with him. And I totally understand it. I'm a huge sports fan. I love watching live sports, and I understand the temptation to gamble on a game in order to make it a little bit more exciting, or to prove how much we might know about something. But that temptation is going to continue to lead him down this path until he realizes that he can't go down this path anymore. But every other time that he's gone down this path, John's come in and cleaned up the mess.
John, thanks. A very tough situation. Appreciate the call. It's our guest. Stay on the line, though, because we're going to send you the book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments. Our guest is Scott Weeman, the author of that book and the founder of Catholic in Recovery. We only have a few seconds left. I apologize to the folks who are on the line. We're just going to have Scott on more. I think that's what we're hearing here. But Scott, tell us something about how people can connect with Catholic in Recovery.
Yeah, you can find us first at CatholicInRecovery.com, where you'll find our full list of virtual meetings available, Monday through Saturday, a variety of general recovery meetings, family and friends recovery meetings, men's lust addiction recovery meetings. We also have Catholic in Recovery fellowships in various parishes, 10 different states around the country. You can find the full schedule of those meetings as well. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and that's about it.
Scott Weeman, the author of The 12 Steps in the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Si.
It's been so much too long. And you can tell by the number of callers that this is something we should do more often. And I think also for those suffering with addiction or addiction in the family, that something you can take away from that is that you are not alone in this. It's a tough time. It's a tough world, and there are many others suffering. And I just keep coming back to that idea that Jesus is a healer. He makes it his business to be a healer, and he really does want all of us to come to his healing. I hope you'll find it at CatholicInRecovery.com. And we'll have Scott on again soon, so more can talk to him. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow for more for Open Forum, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.